So I am Kerry Garrison. I'm the Vice President here at Multicopter Warehouse. I'm also the Enterprise Sales Manager. And today's webinar is on the Autel EVO II Dual and its role in public safety operations and inspection work. Usually those two things don't always go together, but in this case, I do want to address both of those types of roles with this particular product. Now, if you're kind of new to the Autel product, there's one aircraft with 3 cameras. There's the 8K, which is actually the smaller sensor, the 6K, which is actually a larger sensor. It's a 1-inch sensor with adjustable aperture, and the EVO II Dual, which is the one we're going to be spending the time on today. And the Dual, the 2 cameras that are on there are the 8K, the smaller sensor, and the thermal camera. So it has 2 cameras combined, and we're going to talk about how these 2 cameras can work for both public safety and inspection work. So first thing, let's get some specs out of the way. The maximum ascent speed is 5 meters per second in standard mode, or 8 meters per second in ludicrous mode. I kind of love that reference to Spaceballs there. Instead of standard and fast, it's standard and ludicrous. Max descent speed, standard is 3 meters per second, ludicrous is 4 meters per second. So it's got a decent descent speed, but it does climb quite a bit faster. Max speed on standard, 33.5 miles per hour. Ludicrous is 44.7 miles per hour. And a max service ceiling of 22,965 feet above sea level. Did anyone else lose audio? Can you guys still hear me? Okay, no, I guess I'm still there. No sound. Okay, some people can still hear me. Okay, all right. Well, I don't know if I missed anything there for how long. Some people said it lost, some people said it didn't, but I'll try and keep going here. So a huge max service ceiling, 22,965 feet. I don't know anyone who's flying in altitudes that high, but that's certainly pretty impressive. Max flight time is rated at 40 minutes. Oops. And so our office here is located right around 6,000 feet above sea level. Most of the flying I do is at 7, 8, 9, even 10,000 feet. And I've been getting in the low to mid 30-minute range, which is still very impressive for an aircraft like this. It's a few minutes more than like the Mavic 2 series. So I am getting improved flight time over the Mavic 2 with the EVO II platform. Max wind resistance, 40 plus miles an hour. And I have definitely flown it in that to test it. And yeah, it held up very well. Operating temperature range, 14 degrees to 104 Fahrenheit. And it does have 8 gigs of internal storage, and it can support a 256 gig micro SD. Now, some people are saying I lost audio again. Can anyone still hear me? Okay. So Brent, I don't know. A lot of people are saying the audio is good. So I don't know, maybe you should try dialing in instead of using the computer audio. So I don't know if that's what's causing the issue for you, but I dial in all the time just to avoid any problems. So okay, so everyone else, yeah. So Brent, it's probably just you. Sorry. On the micro SD card, I will say that you should make sure that if you're using this, that you want to have a card that has a V30 rating on it. That's going to make sure that it's fast enough. The system does shoot at 120 megabits, so you're going to need a fast micro SD card, and you want to have that V30 rating. Now, there are 12 obstacle avoidance sensors on it. So this is extremely good obstacle avoidance. I threw the specs on here for no good reason other than just take up another slide and make it seem like I'm giving you more information than someone else might. But the specs are all here. The obstacle avoidance on this thing is fantastic. I have not had a problem with it. If anything, I would actually say the obstacle avoidance is too aggressive. It actually can be difficult to get a really smooth shot using the active track, or what they call dynamic track, when you have obstacle avoidance on, because it's just really aggressive and doesn't really create nice, smooth, cinematic shots. Where my Mavic 2 Pro, using active track, even following my Jeep through trails and things, I may nail 70% of the shots. The other 30 may be just too jerky or something. But with the EVO 2 line, the dynamic track, I basically get 0 usable shots in dynamic track with obstacle avoidance, because it's just extremely aggressive obstacle avoidance. But the flip side of that, for things like public safety and inspection work, I don't have a problem with that. I'm not trying to get smooth cinematic shots. I'm trying to keep from hitting anything. And we have ran through trees. We have done everything trying to get this thing to fail, and it has never hit anything. So I've been very, very happy with the obstacle avoidance. If I'm looking at this product as a tool for inspection and public safety versus a tool for cinematic video. So that's definitely going to be my caveat on the obstacle avoidance. Now we'll talk about some typical public safety missions for the EVO II Dual, looking for lost persons, stranded hikers, subject detection or victim detection, disaster reconnaissance, fire monitoring, surveillance and overwatch missions. It has a broad range of public safety applications because of having both the daylight camera and the thermal camera. Now, sure, we can compare this to the Mavic 2 Enterprise Dual, which is the same, and it has fairly the same features, but when we get into the camera specs, that's where you're going to see a big, big, big difference. Are the avoidance ranges adjustable? That's a good question, and off the top of my head, I don't recall. I'd actually have to power one up and see. When I say subject detection, I mean when, for law enforcement and they're trying to find a suspect, being able to have the thermal camera to see in the dark, for example, would be a great use of subject detection. When we look at some other types of detection features, I'm going to talk about that later. So I'll cover this again. So I'll definitely get back to this. Okay. Typical inspection missions: a roof inspection, thermal leakage, water damage. I have that twice. Must be good for that. Solar panels, HVAC, utility inspection. Now, there are some caveats here that I want to go over as well when I'm talking about the thermal camera. There is no temperature reading. There's no spot meter. There's no radiometric JPEGs. This is not a radiometric camera. It is purely a thermal camera that shows you temperature differences, okay? And you can have white hot, black hot, this rainbow pattern. We'll look at the palettes in a moment, but it's good for doing missions where is this hotter than that, okay? If you need a system that can do what temperature is that, then really neither the Mavic 2 Enterprise Dual or the Autel EVO II Dual are the right product. These are great for being able to find a person who's in a field or something where daylight camera is not going to work because it's too dark. Is that hotter than that? Yes, I can see that person there that I couldn't otherwise see. But if I'm trying to do, let's say, a utility inspection where I'm looking at the transformers that are on poles. Now, those run actually fairly hot. you know, somewhere up to, you know, upwards of 200 degrees. Now, using this camera, I can see that's hot. Okay, so what? You know, how hot is it? Is it within spec? You know, I need to be able to turn over a report to an engineer that says this is how hot those transformers were, and I cannot do that with the Autel EVO II Dual. So, or the Mavic 2 Enterprise Dual. Neither one of them are good for that. If you need that level of information, you have to move up. You're going to have a Matrice 200 or Matrice 300 with an XT2 camera, or the H20T camera. These smaller cameras today do not have those features. Now, I've requested that. I just don't know if it's coming or not. So one thing at a time. All right, let's get into the camera specs. I know this may be a little hard to see because I threw every possible thing in here, but I'm going to boil it down very simply here. And let me actually go back one frame here, and let's look at this screenshot. The EVO II Dual, just jumping all over the place. The EVO II Dual thermal camera is 640 by 512 resolution. Now compare that to the Mavic 2 Enterprise Dual, which is only 160 by 120. So we're getting a lot more resolution, 4 times and change the resolution than the Mavic 2 Enterprise Dual. So it's a much better resolution thermal camera. On the daylight camera, the specs are fairly similar to what you would see on the Mavic 2 Enterprise Zoom, with a 1/2 sensor, the same type of performance, field of view, same type of features, JPEG, DNG. Yeah, it's going to perform pretty much like the Zoom without having a 2x zoom on it. The kind of big difference there is they do say it's a 48 megapixel camera, and nah, not exactly. I mean, it's an interpolated 48, and if you're just taking stills, you will get images that appear to be 48 megapixels. If you're doing a mapping mission, it's going to use native, which is going to be 12 megapixels. So just by saying it's 48 megapixels, don't expect that is necessarily going to completely equal far superior photos. It really doesn't. It takes great photos, takes good video. Now, it can shoot in 8K video, which I don't know that anybody really cares about at this point. And the 8K is actually not that bad. It's better than I expected if you are using the H.265 codec. But for most operations where you're shooting in 1080p or even 4K, the bit rate on here with the 265 codec is going to provide really, really good results, and it can shoot in 10-bit log. So very, very good image quality on both stills and video. Just don't expect these ultra high resolution photos all the time. It's really not that good. Is it at least as good as a 20 megapixel for stills? How does it compare to the Mavic 2 Pro? Okay, so one of the worst things that you can look at when you're evaluating a camera's performance is megapixels. You really want to focus on the sensor size, not the megapixels. My iPhone is packed with megapixels on a very tiny sensor, which means I get more noise in shadows and in low light conditions. It really is not going to perform well in those low light conditions. So that's the same here. Now, is it as good as a 20 megapixel for stills? No, it's as good as a 12 megapixel for stills. But we also have to look at sensor size. A Mavic 2 Pro is 20 megapixels on a 1-inch sensor. This is essentially natively 12 megapixels on a 1/2 sensor, or in its high-res mode, 48 megapixels on a 1/2 sensor. So you have a sensor that's about half the size with more megapixels. That does not equal better quality. It means each pixel can take in less light. So on a smaller sensor, the performance is really going to suffer on a smaller sensor camera. So is it as good as a 20 megapixel? Well, it depends on the sensor size. And how does it compare with a Mavic 2 Pro? It doesn't. Mavic 2 Pro is better. It's a larger sensor. So hopefully that answered the question well enough there. Now, is it still good enough for the applications that I'm talking about? Yes, I do believe it is. Okay. Now, next I'm going to talk about the Autel Explorer. This is the app that you use to control the aircraft. It's similar to DJI Go or DJI Pilot or DJI Fly. It's called Autel Explorer. It's the same app for all three aircraft. So it's not a different one for the Dual than it is for the other aircraft. All the EVO 2s use the Autel Explorer. And looking at the shot here, this is obviously from the thermal, and I'm using the picture-in-picture mode. Now, I can do just, actually the icon in the upper right-hand corner that has the two boxes. I wish I could put a mouse over the cursor over this, but there's the icon that has a box with a square in the middle of it. That is how I change the picture modes. This is picture-in-picture. I can select just thermal, or I can select just the daylight camera. So I can have one of those three camera modes. I have my telemetry data at the top, my standard camera controls at the right, my camera settings, my gallery, my shutter, switching between the video and stills. And on the left, you can see it's minimized right now, but if I tap on that, it will open up the map. So I can see my live map. The microphone down in the bottom left-hand corner, I wish there was a way of turning that off, because if you hit a key on the back of the remote, which I do all the time, it puts it into voice recognition mode, which I never want to use. So that's kind of an annoying feature. I don't need to say, take a picture. I'll just push the shutter. It's in my hand. So waste of resources, I think, for them to put that in. The blue box at the top where it says manual flight, if you tap on that, that's where you get to your automated flight modes, like your orbit, your dynamic track. Those modes are under there. And when you first start it up, it'll go, you'll have your choice of the mission planner or the camera mode, but we'll get to the mission planner in just a moment. Next, I want to talk about the different, hold on, see if this was relevant here. Can you please repeat how to bring the map back into the app? Okay, if you're looking at the Autel Explorer, you can, in the top left-hand corner, you see a minimized view of the map. If you tap on that, it will open up the map. And then I can switch between full screen of the map and the camera. And if I click on it again, it will minimize it. So it takes a little getting used to. It's a little different than I'm used to on the DJI products, but you can kind of see the map there in the upper left-hand corner. Okay, it does support standard thermal palettes. You have white hot, black hot, several different rainbow type, fusion, lava, and a highlight of hot areas. Now, you can't adjust these. There's no temperature variance. There's no way of setting thresholds on here. So it's just sometimes toggling through different palettes to find one that works for your particular use case. Does the map view include GPS coordinates? Yes, it does. You always have live coordinates. Alan, does the Leech e-controller app work with this aircraft? No, there's no third-party software support. There's no SDK. So you are only using the Autel Explorer app. All right, so as I mentioned at the beginning, or a little bit ago, when you first start up the Autel Explorer app, you have your choice of going to the camera, which was the screen I showed you a moment ago, or the mission planner. And when we go into the mission planner, we have our choice of waypoint missions, rectangular missions, and polygon missions. And the only difference between rectangular and polygon is one is rectangular and the other you can move to create custom shapes. There, you can save the missions. You can see I have one named Thermal. I created another one. I didn't name it, just called New Mission 2. So I can keep those missions there for future reference. Plus, I can design the mission offline. So I can be sitting at home or in the office and design the mission, save it, and then go out to the field, load that mission up, and execute it. So I don't have to set up the mission on site connected to the aircraft. I can create the mission completely offline. So this is a example of a rectangular mission. And as you can see on the map view, I have the GPS coordinates there. And a new option they just added was dual grid, which you see here. It'll do both horizontal and vertical axes on the map. That was only a week or two old there. It's a fairly simple interface to use. It works very well. To change the parameters, actually, I'm going to show that on the next slide, so I won't get into that. Like I said, it's a pretty simple interface. In the upper right-hand corner there, you can see that it calculates the flight time and the number of images that I'm going to use. So this one was, I can't even see my screen, 156 images, and it was going to take 6 minutes and 4 seconds. So good information there for my battery management. And I'll go to the next screen here. And you can change your flight parameters. So my height, and then based on the grid and the height, it'll calculate my GSD, giving me my accuracy level. I can change the speed, my overlap, side overlap, my gimbal pitch, and I didn't scroll over to show you the rest of them, but you just kind of swipe that over to get to whatever other options are available. So pretty easy to use. Now, when it comes to the camera settings, then I actually have to be connected to the aircraft. So that's where things can get actually a little strange, because if I create a mission that's designed for my thermal camera, it's not going to know that it's the thermal camera yet. So it will set up a grid based on the normal camera. So then when I connect to the aircraft and I go back to kind of my camera view and I switch it to the thermal and I go back into the mission, it will change how many paths it needs because the field of view is smaller. So it does understand which camera I'm using to make sure that it's setting up properly. I just can't change that camera setting until the aircraft is powered on. So that's one thing I wish they would fix. I wish I could design a thermal mission. I wish I could design a mission based on the camera. But that's the only kind of thing that you kind of have to know if you're going to map with two different types of systems. All right, so how well does it work for mapping purposes? 2D maps work really well. So for search and rescue or public safety operations, you could use like Pix4D React, and the 2D maps are going to work extremely well. The resolution is okay. It's good enough for quick and dirty 2D mapping. You can do your measurements, and here I used just standard Pix4D mapper to lay down some lines and a volume there to show that it turns out really good 2D maps. On the 3D maps, like I said, it's not the highest resolution. The quality isn't going to be the same as like a Mavic 2 Pro, but you can still turn out some pretty good quality 3D maps. And you can improve some of this with your altitude adjustment, your camera angle adjustments, how tight your grid is. You do a tighter grid, you're going to get more images. I kind of lost where I was going with that. your gimbal angle, your altitude, oh, and your speed. So you could slow your speed down, getting you more images so that you're getting less motion blur. So there's ways of improving. This was pretty much stock settings with the app, and the 3D map actually looks pretty decent. Like I said, while stated it's 48 megapixel, that's a special mode. You're effectively getting only 12 megapixel images when you're doing the mapping. So if your primary mission for this is going to do 3D mapping, you probably want the EVO II Pro or a Mavic 2 Pro or something that has higher resolution than this particular camera. This is going to get you the same results as a Mavic 2 Zoom or Mavic 2 Enterprise Zoom. So while it totally works for doing mapping, it's not ideal. So then when we're talking about mapping, a lot of people will ask, what about thermal mapping? Well, yep. You just need to make sure that you have enough overlap to make sure that you're getting an image. And again, this image was created with Pix4D. 2D models with thermal work well. And now I'm not talking about the EVO II Dual specifically, I'm talking about thermal. So whether it's the H20T, the Mavic 2 Enterprise Dual, the XT2, 3D models just don't work that well because we're looking at heat sources versus physical structures. So a 2D map is going to work extremely well. However, let's take a look at a 3D map. And yeah, the roof line is actually well below ground level. It didn't capture the sides of the building, and so I ended up with something that would be a interesting piece of abstract art. I did not really get a usable 3D image from a set of thermal images. So just something to understand when you're looking at thermal and mapping. 2D mapping is great. 3D mapping, not really so much. So before we get into, we still have a ways to go, a few more slides, but I wanted to answer a couple of questions on this before we get too far. I mentioned there's no temperature readings, it's only visual differential, which means there's no isotherm setting. Isotherm actually is available on the Mavic 2 Enterprise Dual and other DJI thermal products. And what isotherm is it's a feature that allows you to set a temperature range. And if that temperature range is in frame, it will be highlighted so that it stands out on the screen. Now, this can be a really good feature for search and rescue operations. I mean, there's a number of applications for it, but search and rescue is my favorite. I'm going to set that isotherm for, if I'm looking for a person, usually between 90 and 105 degrees. And then if it sees a person, which is going to fall in that temperature range, it will highlight it and make it easier to spot that. But since it's not radiometric, and well, radiometric doesn't necessarily mean that you can't analyze the images, but it is not a radiometric camera. You cannot set emissivity values, temperature, ambient temperature, humidity. You can't set those values in it. So it's not radiometric, and you cannot analyze the images with FLIR tools. It does not save the temperature data to the files. So something to be aware of, but again, the Mavic 2 Enterprise Dual does not do that either. So neither one of them can perform that task. Now, the Mavic 2 Enterprise Dual does have a feature called MSX, which is an overlay of the thermal on top of the daylight video. And this can actually help with the perceived resolution or detail level of the thermal image. So if I'm looking at a billboard, for example, I will see the heat of that billboard, and it will just be one solid thing because it's all going to be the same temperature. With the Mavic 2 Enterprise Dual or the XT2 or the H20T, or not the H20T, the XT, XT2, or no, let me correct myself. The XT2 or the Mavic 2 Enterprise Dual, they have MSX, and with that on, not only will you see the thermal of the billboard, but you'll also see what's on the billboard. You'll see the actual image on there. It'll be kind of washed out, but you'll still see it. So in some cases, it can help. If I'm looking at a truck, not only can I see the heat image of the truck, I can see what's printed on the side of the truck. Where with the EVO II Dual and the H20T and the older XT, you cannot do that. You'll just see the thermal image. There's really two reasons besides the quality of the thermal camera, right? Which is much better than the Mavic 2 Enterprise Dual, 640/512 versus 160/120. Two main things come up as to why people are looking at the Autel product line. That either A, it's not made by DJI, or B, that they can't buy a Chinese product. Well, yes, Autel is not DJI, so that solves one of them. But why? What's the issue? And the kind of overriding issue that some agencies have or whatever is that they're afraid DJI is transmitting their information to China. And while several prominent cybersecurity firms have proven that that's not the case, there's still an overriding concern. But the only way you're sending data with a DJI product is if you click on the icon to sync your logs to DJI. You are opting in and making a conscious decision to send your flight logs to DJI. If you don't do that, there's no security issue. Autel is exactly the same. There's no data transmitted back to them unless you hit that icon to sync your logs to their servers, in which case you are handing over your data to them. Now, granted, in both cases, it's encrypted and all that, but concerns aside, both of them have the exact same process and methods for taking your data. You have to initiate it. Now, another thing is, well, we can't have a system that's made in China, and Autel is a U.S. company. Well, Autel Drones is based in Seattle, but their headquarters, their parent company, is based in China, right down the street from DJI, and the aircraft themselves are made in China with Chinese components. So if you're looking at Autel as a American-made drone, it's not. Now, they say that they are working on having some production moved to the U.S. so that they can actually be a U.S. manufactured drone, but I don't see how they're going to get away from having certain Chinese components in it. So that remains to be seen what happens there. Okay, let's compare it to the Mavic 2 Enterprise in terms of size. So I've already compared the camera. The daylight camera, they're both actually very comparable on the daylight camera. The thermal camera, Mavic 2 Enterprise, 160/120, EVO II Dual, 640/512. As you can see in the size comparisons here, the Autel is about an inch longer. It's not that much bigger when it's unfolded, and it's about an inch taller. So if size is an overriding bullet point for you, there really just isn't that much of a difference between these two. The Autel does weigh a little bit more because the battery's bigger. That's really about it. The EVO II Dual comes in what's called a rugged bundle, which is a very good carrying case with cut foam, with room for the controller, the charger. It comes with that car charger, comes with extra props, comes with a total of 2 batteries, and the charging hub. So pretty complete system. So you could have 3 spare batteries plus 1 in the copter to have 4 total batteries available to you. And like I said, it's a very good case. There's nothing wrong with it. It's on par with the GPC case, and GPC will actually be coming out with some foam replacement for this case. So instead of buying a whole new case, you can just buy their foam, and it does have a better layout than this, is what I would say, and the foam quality is better. Let's do some pros and cons here. So the pros of it are its high resolution, thermal, very good image quality. The RGB daylight camera, very good quality, not superb, but still very good. You're definitely going to get 30 plus minutes of flight time. And if you're at sea level, that's going to be in the high 30s for sure. The flight performance is very good. There's nothing wrong with the flight performance. The obstacle avoidance is very good, excellent, I would say, on the obstacle avoidance. So a lot of good flight characteristic performances. So there was an issue I had where I just really didn't feel that the sticks were as smooth, or the responsiveness from the sticks was as smooth as I would like to be able to get nicer cinematic quality shots with the EVO 2. And it was because there's only one just overall EXP setting. I couldn't adjust left, right, brake, and things like you can on DJI. And just a day or two ago, a new firmware came out that addresses that, and the app that has the interface in it will be out anytime now. So the few things that I've had where I've gone, hey, these are some really good, big issues that I think need to be addressed, that they have addressed them already. Okay. So one of the pros is it's not DJI. It's not as refined. The DJI products still feel a little bit more refined than the Autel, although the Autel does do a very good job. On the con side, it's going to be just under $10,000 for this system. So it's quite a bit more expensive than the Mavic 2 Enterprise Dual, which is fully kitted out like this. You're going to be around $4,000. It's a big jump up in price, and it's all due to the thermal sensor on here. A 640 by 512 resolution thermal camera for a Matrice 200, the camera alone is close to $10,000. So not only are you getting the camera, you're getting the aircraft along with it. So in terms of value, it's very good for the price. Right now, there's no third-party software support for mission planning, but the built-in one does just fine. And one of the cons is it's not DJI. So I actually have that in both categories. There's people who want it because it's not DJI, but at the flip side, not the DJI products in some areas. Some of the software feels more refined. The flight characteristics feel more refined. So it's both a pro and a con there. And it's still Chinese made. So we're not really getting around that particular issue. So that's kind of my overview on the EVO 2 Dual. I'm going to go and do some Q&A, and there is definitely some questions here to answer. And let's try and get to these. The Parrot Anafi thermal shows the high temp readout on the screen. So does the Mavic 2 Enterprise Dual. I'll point that out. I understand there's no radiometrics with the IR, but will it give an estimated high and low readout? No, it does not. How does the Parrot accomplish this? Software. So that's all it is. It's a software thing. And Autel did not feel that they needed to have on-screen display of temperature, and I have set them straight on that. I have said this is absolutely something that needs to be on there. Whether, I understand you're not going to save it to the file, you're not going to save it as a radiometric JPEG, but the Mavic 2 Enterprise Dual and the Anafi both show temperature on screen. You need to show temperature on screen. So hopefully that will be something that will be addressed. Can you use the DJI goggles with the Dual? No. No. You can't. There's no, well, you know what? Now, okay. So on the remote, there's no HDMI output. So there's no way to connect any goggles to it. There is another product called the Live Deck, and I'll show you that in a moment. But I'll get back to that, Ray. Does the controller have any way to output video? No. But again, there's another option. I'll show you that in a moment. How much is the dual camera by itself? I don't know. I'd have to look it up. Probably $6,000. I'm not sure off the top of my head. Does the Mavic Dual have picture-in-picture mode? No. The Mavic Dual has MSX. So I can slide a toggle. It depends on the operating system. On some of them, you can slide a toggle to adjust for more visible or more thermal, and in between there. And on other versions of the app, it's high, medium, or low setting to control that overlay. So hold on just a minute, and I will show you the live deck. I probably really should have had a slide on this. So this is the Autel live deck. So this is available as well. And the live deck binds to the aircraft the same as a controller. So you're going to have your normal controller bound to it, and you have the Autel live deck bound to it. Now the live deck has 3 outputs on it. It has HDMI, so you get a clean HDMI feed. It has USB, and if you connect to USB, then you need a smart device running the Autel Explorer app, which actually gives you pretty much all of the same functionality as running the Explorer app on a remote. There's just no joysticks. So almost everything you can do on Autel Explorer, you can do when connected over USB to the live deck. And then the live deck also has a network port on it that can stream out an RTMP stream to a remote location. So it is a very handy tool if you need video out going into something. How long will the controller run on internal batteries? You know, I have not had a problem yet. I would imagine it probably is going to run for close to 3 hours or more on the internal battery. And on the bottom, let's see here. Let's see if I have a, and unfortunately, I don't think I have a picture of the remote controller itself. No, I don't. On the bottom of the remote, there are 2 ports. There is a USB-A and a USB-C. So the USB-A is going to go from the remote to your mobile device. The USB-C can then also be used for charging. So you can basically run continuous with an external battery or something else to continue to charge the remote while you're flying, because there are 2 USB ports there. Okay, can you order it with different FLIR cameras? No. There are 3 cameras available. There is the 6K, the 8K, and the Dual. So it's the same aircraft. It's kind of like the Mavic 2, or it's like the Mavic 2 series, right? There's the Pro, the Hasselblad camera, and the Zoom camera, and you can get it with either one of those 2 cameras. Now, you can order another camera. You can get an EVO 2 or an EVO 2 Pro, and then later on you could buy the thermal camera and you could swap them out. And while Autel makes kind of a big deal about how these are swappable cameras, it is not something you're going to do in the field. These screws are very, very tiny. You lose one and you're done. The connector is not very robust. It's not designed for constant taking in and out of the port. When I talk about changing the camera on a Mavic 2 or an EVO 2, I'm talking about you make that change and you're done. You don't go back and forth. That's not what it's designed for. Can you change the FLIR cameras later? I mean, there's only one thermal camera for the EVO II. It's the Dual. That's it. There's one thermal camera. So there's no other FLIR cameras that work. There are 3 cameras. There's the 8K, which is the small sensor, the 6K, which is the larger sensor, and the Dual, which is the one we're talking about. There's no other cameras to swap out later. And maybe they'll come out with other cameras, but today those are the 3 cameras that are available. So that is my take on the EVO II Dual. I do have a video that I did that shows some videos and stills from the EVO II Dual. You can find that on YouTube on our Multicopter Warehouse channel. I will be sending out a recording of this webinar, and I will link to that video as well. But this one, I still wanted to do the webinar on it to answer questions that may have come up and to help get you guys a little more familiar with the product. But the video also does a good job, and yeah, I don't answer any questions because it was just me. So Stacy is saying she's getting about 3 hours on hers, so that's good to know. So that's what I figured. I was probably about 3 hours. I've ran through 3 or 4 batteries, and I felt I probably had another 2 or 3 batteries I could go on that. So it did a pretty good job. So I think I answered all the questions that came in. I hope I did. If not, you can still have a moment here to get them in there. For more information, contact us at enterprise@multicopterwarehouse.com. We will try our best to answer any questions about these. They are in stock right now. So if you want one, I can definitely get them out the door immediately. So talk to us and we'll get you hooked up if you want one. Is it a good product? Yeah, it is. The thermal camera is very, very good. If you want that extra level of detail, whether you're doing public safety or roof inspection or solar panel inspection, HVAC inspection, if you want that extra level of detail, this blows away the Mavic 2 Enterprise Dual. It really does. Is it as good as a higher end, the H20T or the XT2? No, but it's in the middle price point there. The webinar will be available. So yes, you will get an email that has a link to the recording as soon as it's available. So normally that's later today, depends on how long they take to process the video. It will be no later than tomorrow morning, but I try and get them out the same day. So hopefully within the next, before 5 o'clock Mountain Time, I'll have this up on our YouTube channel. Thank you. You're awesome. You're terrific. Thanks. You're the best. You're better than John McBride. Okay, got it. You have 2 of the 6K kits. They're amazing for videography. Yeah, Stacy, I really like the camera on the 6K. I'm just not a fan of the control. It just doesn't feel as smooth as a Mavic 2 Pro does. The dynamic track, I cannot get usable footage off of it. I've sent them videos of it. I've sent them logs. We're trying to figure it out. But right now, I think when it comes to videography, that the Mavic 2 Pro is going to do better than the EVO II Pro. Although that is pure software. That can all be fixed. It can all be addressed. And I've given them tons of feedback on it. Our YouTube channel URL is youtube.com/multicopterwarehouse. Very easy. Just all one word, Multicopter Warehouse. Again, that will be in the link, in the links that I send out along with the webinar, but it's very simple. youtube.com/multicopter warehouse. You can see all of our existing webinars there. We do them every week, every Wednesday. We do webinars, and let me find, here we go. On our website, if you go to training and events up at the top, I have a whole calendar of events here. These are all the upcoming webinars that I have. Next week, how to use the DJI unlocking to fly in controlled airspace. The following week, how to use ground control points in aerial mapping. After that, we're going to talk about the new DJI Enterprise Maintenance Program. And in August, we're going to start off with DroneSense, which is a drone software platform for public safety. So webinars every week. We try and do extremely good about that. Is it NDAA compliant? Yeah, I have no idea. I do not have a component breakdown. Country of origin, it's all going to be China. Pretty much it's all going to be China. So I would guess it would not be NDAA compliant. You would have to get one of the waivers for it. Yes, you can view the webinar later. I will be sending out a recording of it. So yes, you will have that later today. So don't worry about it. You will get a recording of the webinar. Thanks, everybody. This has been Kerry with Multicopter Warehouse. You can reach us at enterprise@multicopterwarehouse.com. Please feel free to join us on our upcoming webinars. Yes, Ray, all the other webinars are on our YouTube channel. So that link that I sent out just a moment ago, you can go there and there's a playlist for all the previous webinars, and all the future webinars are all recorded. So every week we do the webinar. Within usually a few hours, it is online. So yes, your demand. Thank you, Ray. I know I'm demand. I appreciate that very, very much. Thanks, everybody. I will talk to you all later. Bye-bye.